Yesterday, on Wednesday, September 10th, 2025, Charlie Kirk was assassinated. I don't have the words to describe exactly how I feel about it. To say things like it broke me, or I'm heartbroken, feel performative and they're not accurate. So instead of trying to distill this mix of thoughts and feelings into one simple phrase, I'm going to lay it all out in this video. All I ask before I start is that if you're watching this and you hated Charlie Kirk, or you think he deserved for this to happen to him, please get to the end of the video before you make any conclusions. So here we go. Charlie Kirk was a right-wing political commentator. I think everyone can agree on that fact. I know him primarily from his Turning Point USA events, where he would go to different colleges across the country, set up a table in an open area, and invite people who disagreed with him to debate his views. This was an extremely popular show. I'm not going to look up what his exact viewer metrics were, but if you've been at all keyed into internet politics over the past decade or so, you've most likely seen one of his videos. Now, the main appeal of these videos was watching him easily dismantle the ill-thought-out ideas of many college students. Whether you agree or disagree with his political stances, I think it's fair to say that a majority of the people he debated in these events didn't come prepared with well-thought-out ideas. So there was a catharsis in seeing him break down overconfident people until they either admitted they were wrong and changed their mind, or quit in a fit of rage. That's what made the series popular. But that wasn't the main goal or the true value of these events. It wasn't only dumb students Charlie was willing to debate. He often engaged with students who had thought out their ideas, or professors who had a deeper understanding of political thought. These conversations would turn into meaningful political dialogue that could change minds, whether it be Charlie's, his opponents, or mine. One of the qualities about Charlie Kirk in these debates that I admired was his ability to concede points and admit that he was wrong. No, you wouldn't see that often, because again, most of his opponents came unprepared, but Charlie Kirk was not some bigot who was afraid to be wrong. And by bigot, I'm using the dictionary definition of the word. A person who is obstinately or unreasonably attached to a belief, opinion, or faction, especially one who is prejudiced against or antagonistic toward a person or people on the basis of their membership of a particular group. This series was important to me. Again, it was fun watching overconfident people have to face criticism they weren't prepared for, but far more importantly, I got to watch ideas that I held be challenged on both sides. I've had many of my own positions both changed and bolstered by watching it, and that civil, open discussion of ideas isn't something that I regularly come upon in my life. I'm a black guy in my late 20s living in a very affluent, very left-leaning suburb of the DMV. For those who don't know, that's DC, Maryland, and Virginia. The past 10 years of politics has been incredibly divisive, and where I live, combined with the communities I grew up in, having the wrong opinion on controversial issues leads to social ostracization. In 2016, when Trump was running for office for the first time, I voted for Hillary. I was what every black guy around me was supposed to be, a Democrat, and I didn't think anything of it. But as the years went on and more social issues came to pass, I realized I didn't agree with a lot of the positions I was supposed to be holding. I thought that was fine, and that questioning your own beliefs was held as a virtue among the left, which I considered myself a part of at the time. But whether it be friends, family, or strangers, I found that when I started to question ideas and narratives, it would often turn into screaming matches where my point would never actually be addressed. And I'm not saying I expected everyone to agree with me. The issue is that many of the times I disagreed with someone, instead of respecting a difference of opinion, they'd accuse me of being a bad person. For example, when I didn't post a black square on Instagram after George Floyd's death, I had multiple people reach out to me asking me why I wasn't involved. When I engaged with them in good faith regarding my position on the matter, I was told that I was a self-hating black person. And it didn't matter that nothing I had said reflected that opinion. So over time, I learned that in order to not ostracize myself from all of my friends and family, that I'd have to limit how I expressed my beliefs and opinions to the people that I cared about. No, I didn't say any of that for anyone to feel bad for me. I said it to show why I gravitated towards Turning Point. I didn't have to agree with Charlie on everything, because I just enjoyed being able to hear people openly discuss ideas. So that's why Charlie Kirk was so important to me. Now I want to talk about why his death was so horrible. Charlie Kirk was the middle ground. We live in an incredibly divided time, where the left and right agree on almost nothing politically. Most people tend to live in their own echo chambers where they only hear ideas from the perspective of those they already agree with. Charlie Kirk was actively fighting that. It's undeniable that Charlie Kirk provided a platform for ideas from both sides of the aisle to challenge each other in the open. He was always civil with his opponents, even those he disagreed with the most vehemently, and regularly asked his fans who were spectating to be respectful of the people he was debating. I'm gonna play these two clips of women asking him why he did what he did to really cement what his ideology was on the topic.
I go around universities and have challenging conversations, and because that's what is so important to our country, is to find our disagreements respectfully, because when people stop talking, that's when violence happens.
I've never seen someone do this.
Well, it's a growing trend because people like me are facing violence, assault, the left. Yes, the campus Antifa. I've been stormed out of restaurants. I've been assaulted publicly, multiple death threats.
Okay, so what's your goal in all this?
There's more people that agree with me than some people would actually believe, and they come out of the woodwork when I do stuff like this. We record all of it so that we put on the internet so people can see these ideas collide. When people stop talking, that's when you get violence. That's when civil war happens, because you start to think the other side is so evil and they lose their humanity.
I have a question.
Sure. What was your name again? I'm sorry.
I don't think I told you. My name's Mercury.
Nice to meet you.
Why are you here?
Okay, I've been asked that question a lot. First of all, that question should not even have to be asked, but when people stop talking, really bad stuff starts. When marriages stop talking, divorce happens. When civilizations stop talking, civil war ensues. When you stop having a human connection with someone you disagree with, it becomes a lot easier to want to commit violence against that group. What we as a culture have to get back to is being able to have reasonable disagreement where violence is not an option.
Do you think that's not emotional violence?
How is this, what is emotional violence, by the way? I don't know what that is.
It is harm intentionally perpetrated on another human being that is intentionally targeted at their emotional well-being.
Okay, so feelings mean nothing to me. Isn't why we had the First Amendment to try to push our boundaries and to hear things that might make you mildly uncomfortable?
This doesn't make me mildly uncomfortable.
Does it make you very uncomfortable?
It makes me angry.
His goal was to prevent violence by having open discussion. He believed that talking to your opposition was the best way to prevent you from vilifying them, and I don't see how anyone could disagree with that take. But the response to this idea he believed in was the exact dehumanization and violence he was fighting against. We don't know who the shooter is. We don't know what their exact motive and ideology is. There's an obvious conclusion to jump to, but quite frankly, I don't think it matters. Whether the shooter was left, right, or independent, the reaction from a large, vocal faction of the left is anywhere from justifying it to praising the shooting. And that's what makes this situation so bad. There are many people online arguing that Charlie Kirk's opinions were deserving of him being assassinated, and I believe that's an extremely short-sighted way of looking at the issue. Charlie Kirk never advocated for violence against anyone. He openly and often preached for peace and open dialogue between the left and the right. Even if you vehemently disagree with all of his opinions and hated him for them, he still left them at just opinions. And to all the people who say his opinions were so egregious that he deserved death, I don't think you understand the standard you're setting. If you think that thinking someone's opinions are horrible warrants their death, you must understand that there are many people who think your opinions are horrible. A potent example that I've seen floating around this discussion is abortion. A large majority of the right believes that a large majority of the left is actively murdering their babies. Regardless of whether or not you personally agree with that sentiment, many people on the right believe being pro-abortion is a horrible, egregious opinion. By the standard that you all are setting, anyone on the right would be justified in murdering you. That's what you're saying, and at some point, the right's gonna start listening to you. You cheered on Luigi Mangione when he murdered Brian Thompson because you thought Brian Thompson was a bad guy. You cheered on the guy who shot President Trump because you think Trump's a bad guy. You cheered on the guy who tried to kill Nick Fuentes because you think Nick Fuentes is a bad guy. Well, a lot of people think you're a bad guy, and I'm begging you to really ask yourself if this is the precedent you want to set. When the news initially broke of Charlie getting shot, someone told me he got what was coming to him because he was actively advocating for the direct harm of the people he disagreed with. And I know there are many people who think that's true. If you're one of those people and you made it this far into the video, thank you for listening so far. I'd like to take the time to disprove that idea by addressing the main claims I've heard levied against Charlie Kirk in the past 24 hours. The first point I want to address is people calling Charlie Kirk a racist. Over the years, people have called Kirk a racist for a plethora of reasons. Whether it's him supporting Trump, questioning the George Floyd narrative, or just being a Republican in general, but the most common one I've seen in recent times is because he was against DEI, and that's some sort of proof he's racist. Kirk's argument is that diversity, equity, and inclusion policies actually hurt minorities more than they help them. The gist of his position can be summed up in this analogy. Imagine you needed a life-saving surgery and you were choosing between two doctors who both went to Harvard. One of the doctors is East Asian, a minority group that's currently championing a major lawsuit against Harvard because the Harvard administration was making it harder for Asian students to get admitted. Their average GPAs and SAT scores had to be higher than that of other minority groups to get in. The other doctor is black, and per their design, these same DEI policies actively allowed black students with lower GPAs and SAT scores to get into the same college. It didn't stop there though. Those policies aren't limited to just admissions. The grander left has been promoting DEI policies in all walks of professional life. Nobody knows where every particular policy is applied, but we do know the general principle of moving certain minority groups along at a lower standard than others to create an equitable outcome is the goal. So now it's time to decide which doctor you want to perform your life-saving surgery. There's no way of knowing exactly how these DEI policies affected each doctor's career path, but based on how DEI works, it's both logical and safer to assume that the Asian doctor would likely be more qualified. And in this world, down the line, as these policies become more and more commonplace, I personally wouldn't want any black doctors. Not because I think there's anything genetically inferior about black people, but I'd want whoever's the most qualified, which would be the one who had to go through the most rigorous stratification to get to the top. And the more people who come to the same logical conclusion, the less jobs there will be in the future for black doctors. Now apply that to every profession. That's how this hurts black people. And that's not even mentioning the way it damages society at large. Charlie lays this idea out far more eloquently than I did here on multiple occasions. I recommend Would You Fly with a DEI Pilot from the Charlie Kirk YouTube channel. All that being said, even if you disagree with the point and are still staunchly pro-DEI, I'd hope you could acknowledge that this isn't a racist position by any meaningful definition of the word racist. Anytime Charlie argued against DEI, he argued for how he thinks it hurts either black people specifically or society as a whole. That's not racism. Another big clip I see going around is Charlie Kirk saying that if his 10-year-old daughter was raped and impregnated, he wouldn't have the baby aborted. I alluded to the reasoning behind this earlier. Charlie Kirk believed that life begins at conception. He argued this both biblically and scientifically. Because he believed that life begins at conception, he in turn believed that said new life has human rights. He regularly acknowledged how horrific the situation would be, but he believed that it would be immoral for a person to end an innocent life just because that life impacted them negatively. You don't have to agree with that, you can hate that take, but people are acting as though him being against abortion in cases of rape or incest means that he's pro-rape and incest. It's an incredibly disingenuous take, and the fact that people are using that made-up sentiment to justify his murder is disgusting. The next topic I want to address, and the most common justification I've seen this past day, is that he was pro-Second Amendment. People are specifically jumping on this quote where he says, "It's worth it to have some gun deaths to protect the Second Amendment." Here's the full context of that quote.
How's it going, Charlie? I'm Austin. I just had a question related to Second Amendment rights. We saw the shooting that happened recently, and a lot of people are upset. But I'm seeing people argue for the other side that they want to take our Second Amendment rights away. How do we convince them that it's important to have the right to defend ourselves and all that good stuff?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you. So I'm a big Second Amendment fan, but I think most politicians are cowards when it comes to defending why we have a Second Amendment. This is why I would not be a good politician. Or maybe I would, I don't know. But because I actually speak my mind. The Second Amendment is not about hunting. I love hunting. The Second Amendment is not even about personal defense. That is important. The Second Amendment is there, God forbid, so that you can defend yourself against a tyrannical government.
Come on.
And if that talk scares you, wow, that's radical, Charlie. I don't know about that. Well, then you have not really read any of the literature of our founding fathers. Number two, you've not read any 20th century history. You're just living in Narnia. By the way, if you're actually living in Narnia, you would be wiser than wherever you're living, because C.S. Lewis was really smart. So I don't know what alternative universe you're living in. You just don't want to face reality that governments tend to get tyrannical, and that if people need an ability to protect themselves and their communities and their families. Now, we must also be real. We must be honest with the population. Having an armed citizenry comes with a price. And that is part of liberty. Wow. Driving comes with a price. 50,000 people die on the road every year. That's a price. You get rid of driving, you'd have 50,000 less auto fatalities. But we have decided that the benefit of driving, speed, accessibility, mobility, having products, services, is worth the cost of 50,000 people dying on the road. So we need to be very clear that you're not going to get gun deaths to zero. It will not happen. You can significantly reduce them through having more fathers in the home, by having more armed guards in front of schools. We should have an honest and clear reductionist view of gun violence, but we should not have a utopian one. You will never live in a society when you have an armed citizenry and you won't have a single gun death. That is nonsense. It's drivel. But I think it's worth it. I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year, so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights. That is a prudent deal. It is rational. Nobody talks like this. They live in a complete alternate universe. So then how do you reduce? Very simple. People say, oh, Charlie, how do you stop school shootings? I don't know. How do we stop shootings at baseball games? Because we have armed guards outside of baseball games. That's why. How do we stop all the shootings at airports? We have armed guards outside of airports. How do we stop all the shootings at banks? We have armed guards outside of banks. How do we stop all the shootings at gun shows? Notice there's not a lot of mass shootings at gun shows. There's all these guns. Because everyone's armed. If our money and our sporting events and our airplanes have armed guards, why don't our children?
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you.
Charlie Kirk is very clearly and explicitly not being callous towards gun deaths in this clip. Like many right-wingers, Charlie was pro-Second Amendment due to his belief in both self-defense and having the ability to stand up to a tyrannical government. He's also argued for years that he doesn't think gun regulation has the intended effect that regulators want it to. You personally may not hold these values or agree with his position on how to fix things, but the idea that Charlie Kirk wasn't advocating against gun violence is again extremely disingenuous. The other big quote I see going around is Charlie Kirk saying, "I can't stand the word empathy actually. I think empathy is a made-up, new age term. It does a lot of damage." Here's the full context of that clip, followed by a deeper explanation by one of my favorite TikTok creators, WompTop.
Empathy is a made-up new age term that it does a lot of damage, but it is very effective when it comes to politics. Sympathy I prefer more than empathy. That's a separate topic for a different time.
Empathy means suffering in, diving into the emotional perspective of the other person. Sympathy means experiencing suffering with them. It's almost synonymous with compassion, but the implication is you maintain enough distance to keep one foot grounded in truth. Whereas with empathy, a lot of the time people expect you to dive headlong into their emotional perspective, which can be used as a manipulation tool for them to try to get you to actually agree with said perspective, even if it is not valid and deserving of some correction, lovingly. Here's a good example. I have sympathy for you if you're at the place in life where you feel the need to nitpick the words of a dead man so you can celebrate him being shot in the neck in front of his children, but I do not have empathy for you because your emotional perspective is fucking valid.
Again, I couldn't put it in better words myself. And even if you disagree with Womp's perspective and just want to go off Charlie's own words, he says he prefers sympathy. If you think sympathy and empathy are so different from one another that someone who feels sympathy for a situation but not empathy is evil, I don't even know what to say at that point. There are countless other criticisms that I've seen levied against Kirk, but those are the largest ones as of recent. And when I look at those 4 beliefs, at least half the country believes the same things. So if the consensus is that believing and advocating for those positions is worthy of being murdered, then you're arguing that it'd be okay to murder half the country. Another thing that I think it's really important for me to call out is all the people who are going, I don't think this was justified, but people are finishing that sentence in countless ways, but no matter how it ends, they're still justifying what happened. When people use the preposition but, they're excusing what was said before it. I wasn't gonna have a snack, but, and then you fill in the reason that you ended up having the snack. There's so many people speaking out of 2 sides of their mouth right now. They want the social points and grace that one gets from saying they think the shooting shouldn't have happened, while directly afterward explaining why they believe it was justified. It's a small rhetorical deception that a lot of people are getting away with, and if I'm being honest, I don't even think most of them realize they're doing it, but that doesn't make what they're doing any less vile. None of what I just said is even touching how horrible it is that he has a family that he's leaving behind. A wife and young kids that most likely won't really remember what their father was even like. He was only 31 years old. I know any young people watching this might think that's old, but I'm 28. He was a senior when I was a freshman in high school. This whole thing is devastating. So what's next? Where do I go from here? Where do we as a society go from here? This was the guy who wanted to speak peacefully. The people who are cheering for this aren't gonna like what's coming next. And what's fucked up about it is based on everything he stood for while he lived, Charlie Kirk wouldn't like it either. But this has been building for a long time now, and I don't know how to perceive this other than the dam breaking. The last thing I want to say is a message to all the people that knew Charlie. His wife, his kids, all of his friends and peers that knew him. I'm sorry for your loss, and you're all in my prayers. I know how I'm feeling right now. I can only imagine what you're going through. All I can think to say is that I hope time eases your pain. And I know this doesn't mean much coming from some random faceless guy that you don't know, but I want to say this. I will never forget the great man that Charlie Kirk was. May he rest in peace.